All right, good afternoon. We'll start off with a statement on the events in Afghanistan earlier today. The Secretary General strongly condemns the terrorist attack in Kabul's diplomatic district in Afghanistan earlier today. The Secretary General expressed his abhorrence at this act and underlined the need to reinforce the fight against terrorism and violent extremism. Indiscriminate attacks against civilians are grave violations of human rights and international humanitarian law and can never be justified. Those responsible for today's attacks must be brought to justice. The Secretary General expressed his deep sympathy to the families of the victims and wishes a speedy recovery to those injured. He reaffirms the solidarity of the United Nations with the people and the government of Afghanistan. There's also a statement available from the UN mission in Afghanistan, which was issued earlier today. The Secretary General will leave New York this evening to participate in the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Upon arrival in St. Petersburg on Thursday, tomorrow, he will make opening remarks at the forum. He's also scheduled to meet with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, and also possibly with other leaders attending this forum. The Secretary General will be back in New York on Saturday. And earlier today, as you will have seen, the Secretary General congratulated Foreign Minister MIROSLAV LAJČÁK on his election as the President of the General Assembly's 72nd session. And as you may have seen yesterday, the Secretary General gave a speech at the New York University Stern School of Business on mobilizing the world on climate action. In his remarks, he called on world leaders to get on board the sustainability train or get left behind, and said it's absolutely essential that the world implements the Paris Agreement and that we fulfill that duty with increased ambition. He added that if any government doubts the global will and the need for this accord, that it is a reason for all others to unite and stay the course. His remarks were put out and they're also archived on the webcast, including the Q&A. And at the end of his mission to the Central African Republic, Andrew Gilmore, the Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, said that while much progress has been made in the country, there are still deep tensions and fear of a sudden relapse. He said this is a time for leadership, strengthened partnerships, and a coordinated approach that puts Central Africans' human rights up front. He added that warning signs are flashing and must not be ignored. Armed groups coalesce into confusing alliances and continue their atrocious attacks against civilians. He warned that the deep frustration and exasperation of the population over the slow progress is arresting those responsible for crimes and in restoring state authorities have become serious risk factors. Meanwhile, our colleagues at the mission report that 7 peacekeepers were wounded yesterday when suspected anti-Balaka fighters ambushed a patrol north of Mboye in Basse-Koto Prefecture. 1 peacekeeper is seriously wounded but in stable condition. The mission condemns the attack and reiterates its determination to implement its mandate around the country, including the protection of civilians. The mission also reports that the situation in Haute-Koto Prefecture remains tense, with reports of clashes between anti-Balaka and fighters aligned with the FPRC, and that took place yesterday north of Bria. And the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Stephen O'Brien, briefed the Security Council on Syria yesterday afternoon, and he told Council members that the agreement reached in Astana has to succeed. We owe it to the 2.6 million people that we estimate to be in the 4 de-escalation areas covered by the agreement. Mr. O'Brien said the United Nations stands ready to sit with all parties involved and to make it a workable agreement. He added that we need to see a change in access to the increasingly dire situation in the northeastern part of the country rather than the restrictions, he asserted. We need an opening of space to respond. His remarks are available online. And yesterday, over 200,000 students, including some from Idlib and Raqqa, sat for a secondary educational national exam in Syria. UN agencies are providing relief supplies such as mattresses, blankets, food, transportation, hygiene kits, and prep classes. The UN welcomes facilitating students' movement to sit for these national exams and reiterates that freedom of movement is a basic human right and must be ensured for all civilians wherever they are and by all parties to the conflict. And from Yemen, over the past 72 hours, the number of suspected cases of cholera has risen by 10,000 to a number of more than 65,000, and that's according to UNICEF. In just 1 month, more than 500 people have died, including over 100 children. UNICEF cautions that these numbers are only for verified cases, and the actual figures are expected to be much higher. To respond to the outbreak, UNICEF has sent in 3 planes carrying more than 40 tons of supplies, including medicine and IV fluids, to treat more than 50,000 people, but the needs continue to grow. Together with its partners, UNICEF is working around the clock by supporting oral rehydration centers and diarrhea treatment centers, as well as by providing chlorinated drinking water and disinfecting wells and water reservoirs. The UNICEF's representative in Yemen, Dr. Rolano, warned that the situation there is teetering on the verge of disaster and that the biggest victims of this man-made tragedy are Yemen's most vulnerable people, its children. And our colleagues at OCHA have issued its 2016 report for the occupied Palestinian territory today, which underscores that the occupation policies and practices remain the key cause of humanitarian needs there. The internal Palestinian political divide is also a serious contributing factor, the report adds. The new report observes that in 2016, Palestinian fatalities from conflict-related violence in the OPT and Israel declined by 37% as compared to 2015, and while the decline in Israeli fatalities was 48%, Palestinian injuries declined by about 80% compared to 2015, with the vast majority recorded in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The full report is online. And our colleagues at UNHCR say they're working with authorities and partners on the ground in Bangladesh to deliver emergency supplies to the many hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees in the wake of Cyclone Mora. UNHCR had its pre-positioned staff prior to the cyclone and had prepared schools and community facilities so that people who needed to be evacuated could be sheltered. Most of the refugees' homes have been damaged or destroyed, and many of them have lost their food rations, fuel, as well as cooking pots. UNHCR is working to provide plastic sheeting for shelter, while WFP is distributing high-energy biscuits. More on UNHCR's website. And in response to questions we've received offline, on Cambodia, I can tell you that the UN in Cambodia is not involved in organizing or observing the 2017 communal elections. The National Election Committee of Cambodia is fully in charge of this process. We encourage the authorities to ensure that the elections are credible, inclusive, peaceful, and free from intimidation, with wide participation of Cambodian voters. A couple of things to flag. At 1 p.m. this afternoon, there'll be a press conference to preview the Ocean Conference, which will take place here at headquarters from the 5th to the 9th of June. Speakers will include Ambassador Ahmed Sarir, the permanent representative of the Maldives and the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, Ambassador Marlene Moses, permanent representative of Nauru to the UN and chair of the Pacific Small Island Developing States. And tomorrow, right after the briefing at 12:30, the President of the General Assembly, Peter Thompson, will be joined by the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Woo Hong Bu, to be here to brief you ahead of the